Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be making Black Forest Flan. So this is not a Black Forest Gateaux, which is layered with and cream and cherries and such like in between each layer. This is just a single layer, and I'm going to do it in this flan tin, which if I turn it the other way you can see it is has a raised interior, so you get a rim of sponge and then the flat layer of sponge. Now if you don't have one of those tins, and this is a 27 centimetre one, you can use just an ordinary tart tin, a 23, 24, 25 centimetre tart tin, and just have a flat sponge without the indentation that I'm going to have. It will work just as well, really. The only thing with this is that I can put the cream in the centre and level it off and still have some of the sponge showing around the outside if I wish. So I have greased and floured that, and I'll put that to one side, and I have my oven preheated to 180 Celsius, that's 350 Fahrenheit. Now for this flan I'm going to be using the chocolate, because Black Forest Gateaux has chocolate in it, or a chocolate flavoured sponge. So I'm going to use the chocolate for the sponge, and then I'm going to use some cherry jam, some cream and some cherries. And that's and then more chocolate to go on the top, and that's all there's going to be to it. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for the sponge flan I have 120 grams, which is it depends on how much you chop your chocolate, but that's a 2/3 cup measure, so you can see that works out at 4 1/4 ounces. And I have 120 grams, which is 1 stick plus half a tablespoon of butter. I have 100 grams, 2/3 of a cup, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 3 grams, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, 3 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA, and 95 grams, which is half a cup minus 1 teaspoon of caster sugar. So there for the flan, and I also have a pinch of salt to go into the sponge mix as well. And then to go on top I have icing sugar and cream, so 300 milliliters, which is 1 1/4 cups of 1 1/4 cups of cream, and I have 80 grams, 3/4 of a cup of icing sugar. Then I'm going to use another 180 grams of chocolate. Up to that I'm going to grate that on the top, and when I've grated enough I will stop, and that would work out 180 grams at about 6 1/2 ounces, maybe 1 cup. I have 10 cherries, and these are black cherries, and they've been soaked in kirsch, but that's only because that's what I bought. If you just have a tin of black cherries in syrup, that would be fine. And I also have 60 grams, which is 2 tablespoons of dark cherry jam. So they're all the ingredients, and the first thing I'm going to do is to melt my chocolate, and then once it's melted I'm going to stir in the butter until that is melted into the chocolate. That will help to cool down the chocolate for the next stage that it's needed for. So I'll go on. Now you can melt the chocolate either on a bain-marie, a double boiler, or you can do it in the microwave, but you don't need to see the chocolate melting. I'll come back when it's melted and we're ready to add the butter into it. So the chocolate is melted, and I'm going to put the butter in, and I'm going to mix that around until it melts and we have a nice smooth mixture. the heat of the chocolate should melt the butter quite nicely. So that butter has just about melted now and mixed in, so I'm going to set that to one side while we go on to mix the eggs and the sugar. So I'm going to put my sugar into the bowl of my stand mixer, and I'm going to put the 3 eggs in as well. And I'm going to whisk those. Now you could do this with a hand mixer if you wanted to, it will work just as well. I'm going to whisk them until it's all combined and the eggs has gone to a nice pale colour and it's thickened up quite well. So as you can see, that's gone nice and pale now and it's thickened up quite nicely. So I'm going to pour into that my chocolate and butter, and I'm going to mix that together. So I've mixed that chocolate and butter into the eggs and sugar, and it's thickened up quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my baking powder into my flour and my salt, and I'm going to give those a bit of a stir around just to get them combined. And then with my mixer on a low speed, the lowest speed actually, I'm going to gradually add this flour mixture into the chocolate mixture until it's all combined. I may have to change to my paddle, but I'm hoping I can do it just with the whisk. So I'll add it one dessert spoonful at a time. And so with that mixed in, I'm actually going to just take off the whisk, and I'm going to use a spatula just to fold that in to make sure it's all mixed thoroughly. That seems quite nicely mixed. So what I'm going to do is put that into my flan tin. And then I'm going to spread that to cover it and level it off. So that's good enough like that. So I'm going to put it into the oven and I'm going to bake it for 30 minutes. It should rise up a little bit, it should bake quite nicely. And because I've greased and floured the pan, hopefully it will turn out perfectly well. and I'll let it cool down, and then it will be ready to be filled with our jam, our whipped cream and our cherries, and then the chocolate on the top. I baked the flan sponge for 30 minutes, baked very well, and I allowed it to cool down for a few minutes in the tin. Then I turned it out to cool down completely, and this is what it looks like. And this slight crustiness on the edge there is because of the flour that I put in the tin. If I'd have floured it slightly less, and also maybe if I'd have used some cocoa powder instead of flour, it wouldn't have been quite so light. Anyway, it's fine, and the sponge baked quite nicely. It's completely cool. So the next thing to do is to make the whipped cream, and I'm going to put my cream into the mixer, scraping down the jug. Now you could use double cream, heavy cream, whipping cream, any of those will work fine. You just have to keep an eye on it to make sure you don't whip it too far, because it will turn basically into butter if you whip too much. And then I'm going to add my icing sugar a little bit at a time, because it tends to go everywhere if you're not careful. So that's whipped now quite nicely. As you can see, it's standing up nicely. So that's good enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that to a piping bag. So that's in a piping bag ready to be used. But the first thing to do is to spread some of our cherry jam or conserve onto the base of the flan, and you can put as much or as little as you want. I'm just going to spread that over. And that's good enough like that, actually. So then I'm going to take my cream and I'm going to pipe it on, starting in the middle. And you don't have to be particularly neat, because I'm going to spread this out and level it. So I'm just going to level that off. And then with the remainder of the cream, I'm just going to pipe a little bit around the edges. Like that, and a little bit in the centre. And then I'm going to take my dark chocolate and I'm going to simply grate some of that and I think I'll grate that onto a plate, and then I can control how I put that on the flan. And with some grated, I'm actually just making some shavings with some of the rest. I'm not going to use the whole 180 grams, probably not even half of it. I think that would be too much chocolate. So I will adjust my recipe on the blog to reflect that you don't need that much. So what I'm going to do is sprinkle these shavings over, a few on the cream like that, and then I'm just going to drop the larger pieces over as well. And with that covered in the chocolate, I'm going to take my cherries. Now I should say that you could use glacé cherries if you wanted to, and I'm simply going to pop them on the outside, and I'm going to use, I think, probably 13. Just like that, and then that's ready to serve. So I will cut a piece so you can see what it looks like on the inside as well, and then I'll have a taste of it. It's a nice light sponge, I can just taste a little bit of that cherry jam, and obviously the cream, and then the cherry as well. So this isn't anything like as rich and ostentatious as a Black Forest Gateaux would be, but it's a cut down version that works quite well. And if, like me, you have the cherries in kirsch like that, there's nothing to stop you from taking some of that kirsch syrup and brushing it onto the top of the flan before you put the jam on. That would be very good as well. So it's actually quite a simple recipe, and as I say, you don't need the special tin. An ordinary tart tin or even a pie tin would work quite well. You just need a single layer of the cake, cover it with some syrup if you want to, some jam, some cream, some chocolate and some cherries. And as I said, you could use glacé cherries if you didn't have the black cherries that I'm using. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.